This is for those who can't. Okay. All right, here we are. Welcome to the Gut Health Connection. This is our third class. We will be discussing the role of the gut and how it can positively or negatively impact the immune system, your skin, and your joints. So Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, stated over 2,000 years ago that all disease begins in the gut. And I interpret that to mean that the majority of all chronic diseases have some sort of connection to the health of the gut. So this slide here lists just a handful of many diseases that the scientific literature has shown to be connected to poor gut health. And this is just a handful. And we'll talk about a couple of these today. So one thing I want to share with you guys is that some in the holistic health world, I don't know what I'm trying to say, sorry, have defined health as the favorable expression of your genes, whereas disease is the unfavorable expression of your genes. So just keep in mind that your genes are not your destiny, they are your tendency. So even though you may have inherited genetic predisposition for a certain disease, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. You have to set yourself up and put yourself in the right environment in order to get that disease. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Good. What a beautiful picture that is. Okay, so our overall health is impacted by the gut microbiome. Now, the gut microbiome is the bacteria. Let me see if I can use. There it is. The bacteria and the entire environment. That's the entire terrain of your digestive system. So your GI tract is your first line of defense against toxins entering the body. They play a role in breaking down pathogens so that they don't enter in the bloodstream. And one thing is that these bacteria here, they produce their own toxins called endotoxins, and that's a whole other class. But I just want you to know that you don't necessarily have to consume a chemical poison or something like that. Bacteria in and of itself, they wrap themselves in a little envelope and they can stay there and hide until the coast is clear, and then they break out. Just so you know that they do produce their own endotoxin. And sugar interferes with the white blood cells' ability to destroy bacteria and cancer. A lot of research is showing that sugar attaches itself to a tumor and it creates this cloak of invisibility so that your immune system doesn't even know that the cancer is there, and that's how some grow. So that's another reason why keeping sugar at bay is really, really, really important, because not only does it aid you from the inside out, but it contributes to cancer, tumor growth, and even benign tumors like fibroids. So you can see in this example here that your gut, below the mucosal lining, is this wonderful environment of your immune system, your T cells, your B cells, and the plasma cells here create the immunoglobulin IgA, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. But IgA stands for immunoglobulin A, and it plays a tremendous role in fighting disease and bacteria that get into our gut. So if our gut is weak from a variety of things, we can expect that our immune system will also get worn down and possibly become overactive. Jenny's question was, oh, it disappeared, Jenny. Sugar meaning, can you send that again? Sorry.
Okay. When you were saying the sugar was the created the cloak of invisibility, are you talking about processed sugar or where does natural sugar fit into that?
No, mostly natural sugar. I'm sorry, processed sugar, high fructose corn syrup, white sugars, um, and refined carbohydrates that are easily broken down into sugars, but mostly it's the refined, the processed sugars. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, so these things here at the top are all things that can contribute to wearing down your intestinal lining. And when they do that, they break through the tight junctions in the cells, and they can lead to food intolerances. My mouse is crazy. I've seen it. Food intolerances, which will then fire up the immune system. So when you have, um, let's say you have a grain like corn, and the protein of corn is yet to be broken down. It's not fully broken down, maybe because you don't have enough hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes. And you have that corn protein structure that escapes through those junctions because they're not tight, they're leaky. Okay. That gets into your bloodstream. That protein strand, it shouldn't be a protein strand. It should be individual amino acids, is what should be floating around in our bloodstream. Your immune system, all your white blood cells see that and they attack it and they produce antibodies to it and they will destroy anything that looks even anything remotely similar to that. So not only are they destroying this foreign protein that shouldn't be there, but they may destroy part of your body. So gluten, for instance, has a molecular structure that is very similar to the thyroid gland. So if you have leaky gut, and you don't produce enough hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes, that gluten protein will not get broken down. It'll escape into your bloodstream. Your immune system will attack it, and then it'll start attacking your thyroid gland. Gluten has also shown to attack your brain. It can also attack your joints. It just depends on what the weakest link is in your DNA chain. And I'll tell you a personal story at the end of something that happened to me with some grains that I ate or used to eat. One more thing about sugar. It interferes with the white blood cells' ability to destroy bacteria. So not just the whole cancer thing, but bacteria. That was new to me. But not everyone who has an issue with their gut will experience digestive issues. So some people may eat gluten and go, but I don't feel anything. I don't have digestive issues. But what they don't know is that the stiffness that you wake up with in the morning in your neck, in your spine, in your muscles could be it. The brain fog, the memory losses, the inability to pay attention. It could have cognitive effects on you, not just with GI symptoms. Okay, so this diagram here shows the two forms of the immune protection that we have. We have the innate on that side, which is what we're born with, and then we have the adaptive over here, which is what we develop over time. It depends on what you're exposed to. Your body will produce those antibodies against whatever it is that you're exposed to. So here we can see what a closer look of what the intestinal lining looks like. So are those IgA, immunoglobulin A, which play a huge role in your immune system, are made in this area called the Peyer's patch of your intestine. And when the bacteria, the bad bacteria, come in contact with the mucosal layer, they get fired up and they gobble them up. They send some of them through the lymph system to be destroyed right here. So they send some of them in here to be destroyed through the lymph system. So the lymph system plays a huge role in detoxification and getting these bad bacteria out. And then some of them also are sent here to the plasma cell so that they can produce these immunoglobulin A, so that if they see them again, they can attack them. So the SIGA stands for secretory IgA. Secretory just means the mucosal lining of your gut, and those live in here. So last time I think I showed you, or maybe it was the first class, I showed you an example. Shoot, the part I want to show you is cut off at the bottom because my screen is too small. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. You have no idea what I'm talking about. That is so weird. Take my word for it. In this example here, down below, this individual has very low secretory IgA left. The range, I think, was like from 20 to 180, and they had like 9. So this individual has an autoimmune disease. So you can see that somebody who is exposed to, whose gut is constantly inflamed because they have leaky gut, they're wearing down their immune system, and there's just not, you can't produce enough in order to keep up with something that you're introducing to yourself that you don't even know is harming you. So if anybody has an autoimmune disease, ideally, it's a good thing is to go on an elimination diet for 30 days, remove the common, we'll go over this in the next couple slides, but remove some of the common inflammatory foods, just see what reacts with you and see how you respond to it. Okay, so in order for the body to detoxify and fight infection, it needs to have a fully functioning lymph system, which is located all throughout the body. So a blood supply that is constantly infiltrated by pathogens and toxins can result in all of the organs involved in detoxification, such as the liver, the lymph, the kidneys, and the skin, to become overburdened. The lymph system is made up of T cells, which are part of the white blood cell family, and they are called lymphocytes. And you can get those measured with a blood panel, just a regular physical through your doctor. They can look at a complete blood count with differential, and you can see your level of lymphocytes. And if they're high, that could be there's an infection or a bacterial or viral infection. But they play a huge role in fighting chronic degenerative diseases. And here you can see all the lymph nodes that surround just the stomach and the whole intestinal tract. That's because when we come into contact with a pathogen, this system is used to clear it from the body as well. Okay. So our immune system is forced, if our immune system is forced to spend so much time just reacting with food and trying to clear inflammatory foods from our body, there's not a whole lot left to fight things like cancer. So, you know, viral infections have been linked to autoimmune diseases and cancer. Viral, bacterial, parasites, and mold can also activate the immune system. Parasites can be the cause of allergies because they damage the lining of the GI tract. And in some, stomach cancer is believed to be caused by an overgrowth of H. pylori. Has anybody heard of that?
Yeah, my doctor told me that we don't have them.
We don't have them?
No, that we have it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's in our body naturally, but for some, it can overgrow and it can wrap itself up in an envelope and live in your gut because it can survive that acidic environment. So some people have more than others, but in some cultures it's seen more prevalently than in others. So a normal, healthy immune system and hydrochloric acid will clean it through and it won't let it get too much out of control. Okay. So hydrochloric acid. Last week we talked about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So that is when the bacteria in your small intestine can be out of balance. It can be that way because either the food that you consume promotes the overgrowth of the bad bacteria, so refined carbohydrates, breads, crackers, cake, cookies, power bars, whatever. All of those refined carbohydrates feed the bad bacteria, and it's just too much for the healthy bacteria to keep to manage. So you can cure it naturally. You can try changing your diet, removing the refined carbohydrates, getting a really good multi-strain probiotic to help rebalance, to allow your body the natural good bacteria to overcome. But sometimes that doesn't always work. SIBO is a really tough one to rectify. It might take a couple of years. You can also get SIBO when the bacteria from your large intestine migrates north to find food because it's not getting the food that it needs. Now, if you guys remember, the bacteria in your colon prefers to have fiber because that will allow it to grow. They produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, and butyrate is what coats the lining of your large intestine so that you don't get disease of the colon or colon cancer and so forth. So that's why fiber is so important. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So we talked about this earlier, how by taking proton pump inhibitors and acid blockers can cause a resurgence of acid. They don't solve the problem, and in some cases, they make it worse because for the majority of us, we don't have hyperacidity, we have low stomach acid. And I mentioned earlier about the pyloric valve, how it won't close properly if there's an insufficient amount of hydrochloric acid. And any undigested food in the stomach will cause a backsplash of whatever little bit is in there to come up to the top of the stomach and hit the esophagus. So some signs of low hydrochloric acid is poor digestion, regular belching, gas, bloating, diarrhea, fullness 2 hours after a meal. And I don't mean just feeling, satiated. I mean like bloated fullness 2 hours after a meal. Foul breath, no taste for meat, mouth sores, and stomach aches. So without hydrochloric acid, you can develop vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And other studies have shown that proton pump inhibitors can increase the risk of other diseases such as stroke or liver disease because they alter the type of bacteria that's in your gut. C. difficile is a common infection that people get in hospitals, and that's a tough one. Yeah. Yep. And these are the common minerals and vitamins that need hydrochloric acid in order to get absorbed. And here are the other disorders that are commonly linked to low hydrochloric acid. Okay. So here are listed in this picture here are some diseases that have been linked to poor gut health. These listed here are all autoimmune diseases. And according to Dr. Alessio Fasano, he's a Harvard professor of pediatric gastroenterology, autoimmune diseases are the result of intestinal permeability or leaky gut. According to Dr. Fasano, you cannot have an autoimmune disease if you don't have these three things. You have to have a genetic predisposition, you have to have leaky gut, and you have to have a trigger. So, and the trigger could be something like gluten. So you have a genetic predisposition, the lining of your gut is weak, and I lost my train of thought. Is anybody cold? Okay, it's just me. Because I turned it down to like 69 because it just was so hot in here. But let me know and I'll turn it back up, or somebody can. I'm sorry, Randy.
71 right now.
All right, because it was 76 earlier and my fingers are getting cold. What were you saying, Randy? Yeah, trigger. So if you have a genetic predisposition and leaky gut, and then you introduce something like gluten, or maybe for you it's corn, who knows? It could be whatever. It's usually a grain or some form of protein. For instance, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, and that is due to casein, which is a protein in milk. And some research has shown that when children who are have a genetic predisposition to it, to casein, and they're fed milk too early, they can get cow's milk. When they're fed cow's milk too early, they can possibly get type 1 diabetes. Okay, so pop quiz. What's the connection between leaky gut and autoimmunity?
IgA enters the stomach and it attacks healthy parts of your body that are similar in structure to the toxins that it was originally fighting.
So we need, so yes, the secretory IgA, the immunoglobulins, are very important to the gut. We also have immunoglobulins just floating around in our bloodstream too. And those could be the IgMs, IgGs. Those can play a role too. So we need, what are the three things we need to have an autoimmune disease?
Ooh, I know.
Okay, go for it.
Genetic predisposition, leaky gut, and a trigger.
You got it. Winner. You get a melted fat bomb.
On Tuesday. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, so just keep that in mind. Just because you have a genetic predisposition for something, even if it's an autoimmune disease, you won't necessarily get it. You have to set yourself up. So let's say you have a child. Let's say you have autoimmune Hashimoto's and you have a baby. And you know that there's a pretty good chance that that baby could get Hashimoto's as well. So you keep gluten away from that baby, and you keep a lot of grains, and you keep that baby eating healthy foods, getting them to bed on time. So, because we remember stress wears down your intestinal lining too. Leaky gut is the key, because when that mucosal lining is worn away, anything can pass through. And again, stress can do that. Staying up late, drinking, eating awful things. Certain medications can wear away the intestinal lining, like aspirin. So, okay. So allergies, whether to food or the environment, as well as respiratory issues such as asthma and sleep apnea, are also instigated through the whole leaky gut thing. Also, many types of bacteria and candida can create things called histamines. Has anybody heard of someone being sensitive to histamines or foods that are high in histamines? Yeah, you can get a really bad headache. So for those folks, they have to go on a low histamine diet. But one thing that is never really investigated is to see if they have any gut dysbiosis, because a lot of bacteria and candida in and of itself produce histamine. So yeah, you're doing a great job removing certain histamine foods. So histamine foods are wine, cheese, meat, chicken, poultry, even leftover foods produce a lot of histamines. Fermented foods, even, the whole like fermented sauerkraut and so forth. Kimchi, right? So those can give people some issues. Has anybody heard of mast cell activation syndrome? All right, I'm not going to go into it. Anyhow, so folks who have a gut infection can produce a lot of histamines, and that can be also linked to a lot of allergies and so forth. So this study shows that people who are hyperallergic and asthmatic have poor gut diversity. And that lack of diversity can be linked to skin issues like eczema, respiratory issues like hay fever, and food allergies. So a diverse level of microbiota or individual bacteria, they colonize your GI tract and your respiratory tract, all the mucosal lining that you have in your nose, your esophagus, your stomach, vaginal canal, all of that has a mucosal lining on it. So let's look at some disorders of the skin and the joints. So these pictures here are examples of skin and joint diseases linked to leaky gut and autoimmunity. So for the skin, we've got eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, vitiligo, scleroderma. For joints, we have rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, Sjogren's, and ankylosing spondylitis. And I'll show you pictures of those in a sec. So here we have psoriasis or eczema. Eczema is usually the term that they give to children. And here's vitiligo, skin discoloration. Scleroderma is like a tightening of the skin, tightens your face, everything around here. Rheumatoid arthritis. And all of these, like fibromyalgia, these are all, you have to have those three things to get these autoimmune diseases. You're eating a food you're not supposed to, you have leaky gut, and there's some kind of genetic predisposition. And fibromyalgia is tough because there's no test for it. You just feel awful and your whole entire body just aches. And Sjogren's, ankylosing spondylitis, you might see some of these people, they're constantly hunched over, and even at young ages. It's an autoimmune disease. Well, that'll be coming next. They say when those kids are older, they're going to all be hunched over like that. You'll see some people now walking like this, but. All right. So I want to show you guys a video real quick.
Dr. Peter Osborne has treated Linda McGeera for gluten intolerance the past 4 years in Sugarland. Her immune system negatively reacts to gluten, which is a protein found in grains like wheat, barley, rye, and oats. I was literally wasting away. Gluten intolerance affects almost everyone differently. Some gain weight. Linda was losing weight.
I went to 3 doctors who told me I was suffering from depression, and I knew I wasn't suffering from depression.
She also suffered from thyroid disease and osteoporosis. Both have been linked to gluten intolerance, along with 190 diseases.
It's actually the only known documented cause for any autoimmune disease. So that's rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, dermatomyositis, Sjogren's syndrome, celiac disease, Graves' disease.
Dr. Osborne says it's even been connected to type 1 and type 2 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, and eczema, migraines, and asthma, to name just a few.
We know actually brain induces or can at least contribute to these particular diseases.
Many doctors believe gluten intolerance is more common now because our food supply has been processed and manipulated differently the past 30 years. It's often hard to get a diagnosis for gluten intolerance or celiac disease, the more serious form of it.
The doctor would run a blood test that measures a certain antibody. Those tests come back oftentimes falsely negative. So they're not always 100% right, and in most cases, they're not right at all.
Dr. Osborne suggests patients undergo a DNA test. He says genetics provide 100% proof. Removing all grains from the diet can help control problems and help Linda.
I'm feeling wonderful. In fact, I feel better now than I did probably 20 years ago.
Yay for Linda. All right. So yeah, research is showing that there's a connection between dysbiosis and heartburn, constipation, and diarrhea, because the bacteria do play a role, believe it or not, in all of these things. And it's not necessarily a cause and effect relationship, but there's some kind of linkage. Now, here's something new, is that restless leg syndrome has been linked to some form of dysbiosis. So maybe it's SIBO. And what they're finding out is that the bacteria in your gut play a role in the development of the myelin sheath. In last class, we talked about the myelin sheath in your brain. The myelin sheath is the, see if I can get my mouse to come around, is this area right here. It's like the insulation that allows the messages to go from one end of the neuron to the other end and cause a reaction. Well, when the myelin sheath is worn, muscles don't function right, and that's how you can get some neuromuscular disorders, tremors, shuffling of the feet, things like that. All right, so root cause. Dun dun dun. It's not new, but leaky gut obviously plays a role in diseases of the brain, skin issues, thyroid, your colon, your adrenals, which are those little two almond-shaped glands on top of your kidneys, joint issues, and sinus issues. So research has found that 75% of people with new onset untreated rheumatoid arthritis have the bacterium Prevotella copri in their intestinal microbiome. And 90 to 98% of all sinus infections are due to viral infections and not bacteria. So if you're constantly given an antibiotic for a sinus infection, then maybe you never had it was a viral infection the whole time. Just something, but they don't test for that. You know, it's a bummer. So a weak immune system can make you susceptible to viruses, which are impervious to antibiotics. And that's another reason why it's so important to keep your hydrochloric acid up and your digestive enzymes up, because they also are antimicrobial. They also, not only do they help break down food, but they break down the protein structures of the bacteria as well. They chop those things up. Chronic fatigue. Does anybody know anyone who has chronic fatigue? No. It's a tough one because you can't test for it. There's no blood test. You know, they're just constantly tired. But rarely is the gut ever looked at as far as being implicated. All right, so what are some healing options? Well, you can take, if you have dysbiosis, and so let's say you have a lot of joint pains or skin issues, you can take medications. They have those out there. They have some antibiotics that you can take. But remember, when you take the antibiotics, you also have to follow that up or take a probiotic with a multi-strain probiotic. And the Saccharomyces boulardii is actually a type of fungus. So if you're taking an antibiotic or a strong medication like diflucan for yeast or candida, don't take Saccharomyces boulardii because that's not going to work. But if you just have a general infection and your doctor gives you antibiotics, then make sure you follow it up with a good multi-strain plus the Saccharomyces boulardii. So we've got medications as an option, and we've got a whole foods diet. Remove all the refined foods from your diet and just eat clean. At least try it for 30 days. So an elimination diet, basically, you can eat anything you want except for these things. So you have the whole grocery store available to you except for these things. So no wheat, no corn, no legumes because of the lectins. We talked about that. No dairy products. No high fructose corn syrup or hydrogenated oils. No processed meats. No nuts or seeds. No citrus fruits. Nightshades, so that's tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants. And I know I'm missing a whole bunch, but that's all I can think of right now. No processed foods. Anything that comes in a crinkly bag or some kind of box with a barcode, probably not a good idea because you just don't know all the other preservatives that are in there, even if it's not listed. I think the one exception is a Larabar, but I could be wrong with that because there's nuts in it, so forget it. Scratch that. Don't even eat that. And then, of course, no alcohol or caffeine.
So what's left?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Water.
We've got
Water. That's good.
fat bombs. We've got eggs. We've got, come on, guys.
Chicken, white meat, chicken and fish.
There you go. As long as it's not processed.
Leafy greens.
Tons of leafy greens. You can eat onions.
Now, I have a question.
No?
You said processed meat, but that says beef and pork. So,
Oh, yeah. Beef and pork. Yeah.
No.
You're not, yeah. And also processed meat. Yeah.
Okay.
deli meat.
And so why no beef? I don't really mind.
My guess is because they are not clean. I guess if they were to, now this is just a picture, but I guess if they were to say only pastured animals, then okay. But I'm sure because remember, when you consume food or animals from a confined feeding operation, not only are they fed corn and soy that are genetically modified, but those two products have been sprayed with glyphosate, right? An insecticide that not only kills the bugs in the field, but the bugs in your gut. So you've got, and these animals are given antibiotics and other medications and growth hormones, and you just don't want to put it in your body if you're trying to get better.
but you're saying if you can get organic,
Yeah, organic would be great. But ideally, it's pastured from birth to death. Grass fed. It should say grass finished.
I can get
You can, because you've got a sister who grows
lamb.
lots of wonderful.
Pasture fed, fully organic, no pesticide, no lamb.
Yep, I know. You're so lucky. I would love it.
I'll get with you on that.
Mhm. So when you consume like healthy fats in your diet, like coconut oil and stuff, just one thing to keep in mind. As we get older, we don't need as many calories as we did when we're in our 20s, teens, and when we're growing. And in the next class, I'm going to talk about intermittent fasting, and just keep this in mind. When you give your body a break from food, food can of course bring you life, but in the society that we live in, we don't necessarily need to eat all the time. The whole message of eating 3 square meals a day and 2 snacks, I think is great for kids, but not necessarily adults. We don't need to eat that much. What we need is nutrients. We don't need to eat a ton of calories, and just keep in mind that grains are nutrient poor but calorie dense. If you're out running around and moving, okay, fine. I totally get that because you are going to burn through all of those carbohydrates. Because if you are not moving and you're consuming carbohydrates, those carbohydrates are going to turn to sugar, and then then your liver's going to turn it into fat. Because when you raise carbohydrates, or when you eat carbohydrates, you raise insulin, then if you're not, insulin is a growth hormone. You can't burn you can't have insulin high and then also burn it at the same time. When insulin is high and you're not moving, it's going to be shuttled away towards fat production. So just keep that in mind. What's really important is having lots of fiber, vegetables that are full of nutrients, but there's not a whole lot of calories there. So some people need to go on a low sulfur, low histamine, low oxalate diets. Oh, I'm talking about it at this class. Fasting and detox. Well, we'll talk about it next week too. And there are some herbals and some botanicals that can also help heal the gut. Probiotics, of course. Inflammatory foods are, believe it or not, even whole grains are inflammatory. Dr. Perlmutter writes a good book called The Grain Brain, and he talks about the inflammatory effects of grains. And some people are just more sensitive than others. Alcohol, of course, is inflammatory. Fried foods, we all know. Foods that are high in omega-6 oils. So whenever you eat crackers or chips or even, sweet potato fries, they're usually, or you go to an Asian restaurant and they have something fried, they're probably frying it in soybean oil because they come in these big commercial jugs and it's inexpensive and it's inflammatory. Dairy can be inflammatory, and of course added sugars. This is autoimmune paleo. If anybody wants me to send them this list, I can, but it's kind of like really condensed. It's the elimination diet even more so. And if you want to detox, we've got fasting. We've got to clean out to, there are detox programs out there. There's organ detox, and then there's detox on a cellular level that are different. You can also sweat. So thermotherapy, of course, drinking lots of water will help. And for some, it depends on what's going on, but foods high in sulfur like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and so forth are really help to detoxify. Onions and garlic. And then, of course, once you do detoxify, you need the binders like flaxseed and animal pectin to help bind it up. And then some supplements that will help you to also detoxify are N-acetylcysteine, which is the precursor to glutathione, but liposomal glutathione is quite expensive. So just try to go with N-acetylcysteine at first. So anyhow, that's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
And I have 2 minutes to go. Yes, Neil?
Yeah. You talk about medication, particularly for joint pain. I take the glucosamine and MSM. Is that considered medication, or is that a supplement?
I think those are supplements. But new research is showing that glucosamine and chondroitin is not as effective as they once thought. But I have to look into that for you because I don't know a lot about it. I've just heard.
But it's not like a harmful medication. It's just
right, yeah. Like there's a new, I think it's Designs for Health, or maybe it's Thorne Research that has a product out there that doesn't have any glucosamine or chondroitin in it. And it's supposed to be a little bit better for your joints. So, just a thought. I don't know.
Cool.
All right, guys, thank you.
I know it does. That's part of it.
Yeah, if it works for you.
It's not personally, it's still healing.
Sure. Let me know if you have any questions about anything.
Everybody's different.
Jenny, any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Veronica.
Sure. Sorry if I had to rush through it. I really thought that. Thank you. That I was going to keep you here super long. Awesome. Oh. They're over there. These are good to have if you know you've got to run out of the house or go to the gym and you don't want to eat. You're starving before you go to a class. You pop one of those in your mouth and it's good enough for you to make it there, do your class, and come home and eat.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's really good. So, little thing. Yeah. Water. Sprout. Only the broccoli seeds I do, the lentils I cook. And beans I cook. And you want to put the beans in? Yeah, sprout all your legumes. But the broccoli sprouts are just raw. Kind of like when you get sprouts.
Oh, I have some of those look like little plants.
Yeah.
Let's get some of that.
So I'll bring these back next week.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see and taste what they look like. Yeah.